Hey everybody, I'm going to give you guys a quick dive on our whale behavior metrics. And what we're starting off looking at is our whale holders distribution addresses model, which takes the last 1 day percent change, 7 day percent change, and 90-day percent change of the amount of addresses that are deemed whales over time. So obviously 3 different time frames: short term, semi-short term, and then long term with the 90 days. I guess you could call that even more midterm if you're looking at like 1 year plus as long term. But regardless, this gives you guys an idea of which assets are showing signs of whale addresses blossoming, the amount of whales growing versus the amount of whales dropping. And right now I have things sorted by the largest accumulation over the last 90 days to the smallest accumulation over the last, or the most dumpage, I should say, over the last 90 days. And really what this model allows us to do at Santiment is take a quick look at which whales of a particular asset are doing uncommon things, such as loop ring, which has been seeing just over the last 1 day about a 10% increase in the amount of whale addresses that now exist. And we use this to kind of find things to tweet about or talk about on our videos, or even our This Week in Crypto calls sometimes, if you've joined us for those every Friday at 2 p.m. UTC. So long story short, I've put together a few different sand-based templates based on what's going on this model and a few other models that I checked out prior to starting this recording. I'm going to show them to you now. Really what this is doing is taking the percent changes that we saw over on these pages roughly and seeing them in a different view on Sandbase. So right now, I'm looking at the amount of 100,000 to 10 million coin holder addresses over time. And we can see, going back to October 25th, before, some fundamental news really started to rise the price, as many of you know, with Loopring. I won't get into it now since we want to keep this all about the data itself and how to use whale behavior metrics. But really on October 25th, we were looking at about 275 million coins held by these whales holding 100,000 to 10 million coins, or I guess we can call that about $296,000 all the way up to about $22.96 million in total holdings among these addresses. So going from 275 million coins combined in this tier all the way up to about 353 million, just about, give or take, we'll call it 8-9 days later. That's about a 28% increase in whale, I should say, the balance held by these coins in what is really a very short period of time. So this is significant. And if you were really watching the whale behavior going on during this span, as the price was rising, you would say to yourself, this drop here probably is not going to last very long, because the whale trend just keeps going up, right? And yes, there was a bit of a drop off here, but it wasn't really significant at all compared to where we were back on October 25th. So this would be a clear sign that those large stakeholders, those who have the most at stake when it comes to Loopring's price, they're showing a lot of confidence right now. And that probably was a pretty good sign that we would see some price ascension. Now, could we predict this much price ascension just based on whale behavior? Probably not, but it was certainly one of the biggest indicators of any asset in terms of large accumulation happening in a very short period of time. Now, I'm going to give you guys a look at MATIC next, so you can see exactly what's going on there. I've highlighted the 1 million to 10 million coin tier. In this case, it's about, give or take, 1.8 million all the way up to 10.8 million. And Right now, we're seeing a bit of a short-term rebound. Many people are interested in MATIC after, earlier this year it showed some pretty incredible price surges isolated from the rest of the markets. So really, from a long-term perspective, going back 3 months, you can see that the price has risen pretty or I should say the amount held by this tier has risen pretty steadily, peaking on October 7th, while the price was actually quite suppressed. And sure enough, the price eventually caught up. And there is some nice leading indication to looking at these whale behavior, which is why we're really covering it on this video. And just in the short term, it was starting to show signs of dropping, but it quickly was scooped back up after the dip happened. So from November 3rd just to November 6th, the price dropped about 7.5%, but so did whale holdings in tandem with it. And as soon as the price dropped about 7.5%, we started to see accumulation again, going right back to where we were at about 3% scooped back up by these whales. So this is much more of a small micro amount of whale behavior compared to what we just looked at with loopring. Let's take a look at another large one, which is Decentraland, which, as many of you knew, had a massive rise. The price jumped about 373% in less than 3 days, which is quite insane even for cryptocurrency. And you can see that the accumulation of these 100,000 to 10 million coin holders, which give or take is about 279,000 all the way up to 200, or I should say 22.8 million dollars held by this tier. They really made their accumulation from the 26th, give or take up to the 29th, and the price didn't even really peak until the next day. So this was some nice leading indication here that whales knew something was up and there was going to be some sort of price boom that, of course, was in tandem with some other fundamental news that I won't jump into. But guess who tends to hear about this and react to the fundamental news first? It's these large stakeholders who really know what the project is up to, what collaborations are around the corner, development, kind of miscellaneous news that only they might know about. And this would be a good sort of insider's edge to seeing that a price rise might be around the corner when you see just a ridiculous increase in just a couple days. I'll zoom out to see if there was anything that matched it. Not really in terms of this quickly, but you did see, back on February 2nd, all the way until it looks like April 15th, this was around the Bitcoin all-time high. There was an accumulation of about 77% at that time. But just in this 2-day span here, we had an accumulation of about 25%, which is equally, if not even more impressive than that 2-month stretch that we just looked at. So a couple others just to give a quick look at. Raiden had this interesting looking dump here that started on the 26th, and then it rebounded back up from November 4th to November 5th. And look what happened with the price as the accumulation was happening. Huge spike there. Ocean, another one that had a big spike. There was an immediate dump afterwards. It stayed flat for a while as the price was starting to decline. But look, as the accumulation started here, where, it's a very modest, only about 1.4% accumulation on their holdings. But it's a mild instillment of confidence that, the dump was not, or at least for now, is not continuing. And the holdings have been scooped back up, likely by many of the same groups of whales that dumped right back in the early part of November. Uniswap, I had it highlighted, but I'm actually going to leave this one alone. There's some interesting things going on with like the 100,000 to 1 million tier, which makes up about 7.8% of the total supply. But this is more of a wait and see. I would just keep an eye on this because there's been some very interesting alpha happening with Uniswap whales as of late. So moving on to a similar metric, but not quite the same, we're looking right now at SNTVT, which really hasn't been discussed in a large capacity in a while by the crypto crowd, but it is doing some interesting things. And that is the fact that the top non-exchange addresses, top 10 in this case, it's a little hard to see, but you can actually edit this if you'd like. Right now we're looking at the top 10 non-exchange addresses that have accumulated between the 27th and today about 167 million coins. That's about a 6.5% increase on their holdings. And then in tandem, the top 10 exchange addresses have essentially been moving the opposite direction. You'll notice there's kind of a mirror, not quite a perfect mirror, but definitely a semi-mirror effect that goes on between the relationship of these two. And the top 10 exchange addresses have just dumped a whole bunch in unison with the top 10 non-exchange addresses accumulating a bunch. So another way to look at this, I can take these off and actually just type in top non-exchange addresses. Don't click on the chart just yet, and then go top exchange addresses. And down here, you'll see a button that says combine. I'm going to click on that. And what I can do now is essentially do any kind of math I'd like in terms of addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division to relate these two metrics to each other. And I'm going to change this to the division symbol represented by a backslash. I'll just call it top 10 non-exchange holdings divided by top 10 exchange holdings. And then I'm going to click combine and take a look at this huge spike right here. So the ratio between the top 10 non-exchange supply and the top 10 exchange supply went from 24.7 all the way up to 70.4 in just a single day. And that is more or less a 3x on the ratio, which is massive. And there is definitely a relationship when it comes to the ratio going higher and then future price movement going up, depending on the asset. There's not really any perfect alpha going on that we can see in this short time period for Santiment. But if you can see something like, this spike here, price tends to move up as the top 10 non-exchange holdings versus top 10 exchange holding ratio grows. And then look at how, even though this spike happened after there was starting to be a decline, the price really was starting to decline already, which is, of course, was kind of a market-wide drop here. But still, take a look at many of your favorite assets and see the relationship between these cumulative whale holdings, and you'll likely find some pretty interesting alpha to look at. But I highlighted Santiment just due to the fact that, looking at the shorter time frame again, we're seeing this massive spike in coins that have moved away from these top wallets on exchanges and onto some of the top wallets off of exchanges for Santiment. A couple others to look at using the same metric would be Wi-Fi, where you can see this big spike that just occurred here. This one has seen quite a drop off, and Wi-Fi, if I change it to price by Bitcoin, take a look at that. So this is actually just Wi-Fi's price in relation to Bitcoin instead of just its raw price. And look at the alpha that's been going on with the top non-exchange whale ratio to top exchange whale ratio, or I should say top non-exchange divided by top exchange whale. I don't know why that's such a mouthful for me, but it's been declining for a long period of time, and the price has declined along with it. Look at how here at the beginning of this 3-month stretch, it was really rising fast, as the price was too. And that's not a coincidence at all. So there is some nice leading indication with this ratio. And I really am interested to see what the price does with this huge spike in the ratio going back up to really the highest it's been since early September. You don't typically see these huge jumps upward. The last time we saw it was in early August, or early to mid-August, just about 3 months ago. So keep that in mind for Wi-Fi. Last but not least, I've just drawn a line for Ethereum showing the steady rise in this ratio of top 10 non-exchange addresses versus top 10 exchange addresses. It's very clear that more and more Ethereum for a variety of reasons, whether it be DeFi or lending, whatever kind of use cases Ethereum is showing more and more of on a daily and weekly basis. It's causing the top 10 non-exchange addresses to continue to balloon as the top 10 exchange addresses fall. And going back a year, there was about an even amount, maybe 0.94. So there was actually more coins in the top 10 exchange addresses than there were in the top 10 non-exchange addresses. But that's changed in a hurry. And it actually peaked up at about 5.1 times the amount held on the top 10 non-exchange addresses versus top 10 exchange addresses. So you can see what a difference a year makes and really what that does to the price. And of course, this is not the end all be all metric, but there is undoubtedly a correlation when you look at these two metrics together. So just wanted to show that off to you guys. A few reminders to please like and subscribe our videos. It is a massive help in our growth on YouTube and just on the Santiment platform in general. It is hugely helpful to just spread the word, even with just a click of the button, a comment. Even if you hated these kinds of videos, giving us comments and feedback really helps us improve and get an idea of how we can make these videos as useful as possible for you guys. So please feel free to engage. Also, let anybody know that we have a 35% off promotion going on between now and Thanksgiving. You can simply go to the santiment.net/pricing page and enter the code SANGIVING21, and you'll instantly have your first monthly cycle deducted by 35% off the price, which is a very nice deduction. And we really want you guys to be able to enjoy these metrics for cheap. So please take advantage. We will be back on Friday for another This Week in Crypto call. So stay tuned at 2 p.m. UTC, and we will try to give you guys a nice macro update on what's happening with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and whatever other assets you have in mind. So we'll talk to you then, and stay safe.